A very warm welcome to all our enthusiastic participants from across time zones joining us today. My name is Nirupama and I will be your host for the session. For all our new participants, Five Elements Sustainable Development Group is a consultancy and a collaborative network of institutional and individual partners committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Under the mentorship of our chairman, Mr. Arun Amirta, we are on a mission to foster collaboration and consummate synergies to achieve impact at the nexus of smart cities and affordable housing, renewable energies and smart mobility, essential tech for development, impact finance and leadership development, and capacity building. The Gender Justice India webinar series is brought to you by Five Elements SDG, where we bring on thought leaders, entrepreneurs, policy practitioners, and subject matter experts from around the world to engage with and discuss a plethora of issues related to the gender nature of society, culture, and economy. Before I introduce our esteemed guest for the evening, let me humbly reiterate a few house rules. Respected participants are requested to keep their microphones muted and are encouraged to type in the comments and questions in the chat box. We are streaming live on YouTube as well, and hence questions will be picked up from the chat box there in addition to our Zoom event here. Please feel free to direct your questions on the platform you are watching this on, and we shall take them up during the Q&A session. This month, we are very kindly joined by Amita Pitre, Lead Specialist Gender Justice with Oxfam India. She has a master's in public health and more than 20 years of work experience on issues of gender equality and gender-based violence. Amita is also a Fulbright Nehru Visiting Fellow and has completed her fellowship in feminist legal theory at Emory University, Atlanta, USA. Oxfam India works extensively with youth, both boys and girls, on gender equality. Amita leads the campaign Empowerment Not Age of Oxfam India, which urges a greater reflection on the consequences of increasing the age of marriage for girls. Additionally, she also provides technical leadership to the gender justice portfolio at Oxfam India, which seeks to reduce and address violence against women and girls and child early and forced marriages in 5 states. Here, Oxfam India works at the community level through building women's leadership and working with men, boys, and influencers to foster positive social norms towards gender equality. At the same time, they aim to influence governments for better policies, programs, and their better implementation to foster gender equality. It is an honor to host you, Amita ma'am. Delighted that you are here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to put on my PowerPoint. So let me know if you can hear me well and if you can see my screen.
We see your screen, ma'am, and we can hear you.
Okay. So thank you, Nirupama, and your organization for inviting me here. I grabbed the opportunity because we are in this campaign on empowerment, not age, and we are trying to reach out to a lot of people to let them know what are the current views, facts, happenings on the ground related to the complexities of child, early, and forced marriages. So basically, till a couple of years back, maybe 3 to 4 years back, child marriage was not considered a very happening area, simply because, yes, there's the governments are interested in reducing child marriages. The SDGs talk very much about it. We also feel that child marriage is actually an affront to gender equality and it should be reduced. But it seemed like a no-brainer. Nobody can have any problems with this agenda. And of course, we want the best. And we know that when you marry too young, so many of us, I mean, it's not even a matter of age. Girls in India will tell you, and girls across the world, especially in Asian, South Asian communities, will tell you something fundamentally changes when you get married. Especially in the middle classes where you're more used to gender equality within the household. The first break with patriarchy is when you get married and suddenly you realize that you and your partner are not really treated equally within the house. So very often in the middle classes, the girl and the boy have actually mostly attained gender equality, but patriarchy is what you really encounter, especially after marriage. So when you marry at a younger age, of course, it's a no-brainer that it is going to hamper the human rights of young girls. But suddenly, why has this become a happening area where there is a debate and discussion, and people are actually on two sides of the same issue, and progressives, even the women's movement is divided on this, the child rights movement is divided on this, and that's where I want to share a little bit of what we have been looking at and discussing in the last few years. One is something as fundamental as the definition of a child, which was the UN Child Rights Convention very clearly puts it that anybody who's under the age of 18 years is a child unless specifically designated by certain laws. When a person below the age of 18 is given certain rights, but unequivocally above the age of 18, a person is a major. And child marriage is something, so currently we are talking about a move to increase the minimum age of marriage for girls from 18 years to 21 years. So already the entire issue of who is a child in India, because if you are not allowed to marry up until a certain age, that means you're treated as a child. The other big discussion point has been, is child marriage a social issue or is it a legal issue? Is it enough to have laws, and will that be enough to address child marriages? And then are we being responsive to young people, their needs and their well-being, or are we being responsive to something else like the country looking good in the SDG parameters, etc.? So to come back again to the point, that the Prohibition of Child Marriages Act is actually a very old act. It is from the way the current act is from the time of 1978, and the minimum age of marriage for girls was put at 18 years right then in that act, and the minimum age for marriage for boys was put at 21 years. So there is that difference of 3 years, which is now again being strongly contended. But at the time, nobody really batted an eyelid, and it was very clear that in a patriarchal society like India, girls tend to be younger than boys when they get married. So if boys, for example, were designated as 18 years, which they rightly should because they are also majors at 18 years. But if that would have been designated as the minimum age of marriage for boys, then it might have resulted in girls again marrying younger than them and creating a problem. So probably at that point, this 18 as the age for girls and 21 as the age for boys was put there. And in 2006, there was an important amendment because for a long time, there was a feeling that the Child Marriage Act is just there. There is no political will around it. There is no movement, and it doesn't speak to the realities of young people. So in 2006, what was made, the important change that was made is that under the age of under the minimum age, that is 18 for girls and 21 for boys, child marriages will be termed voidable. For the first time, it happened that if there is a marriage and if the government fails to stop it, the young people can still opt out of that marriage. So within 2 years of gaining majority, the young people can say that they did not give a valid consent to this marriage because they were minors at the time, and they can opt out of the marriage. But at the same time, it wasn't compulsorily void. So it recognized the circumstances that it is a conservative patriarchal society. Even if girls want to opt out of it, they may have no support for it. Their life might be irrevocably tied, and since there is no external social support or no other kind of support available to girls, they might want to continue. And it's true that not all underage marriages are necessarily coercive. Sometimes girls don't have any other known reality. They may be in love with a boy, or they may actually have a comfortable marriage, or even if they don't have, the discomfort from outside that marriage may be greater for girls. So for various reasons, they may opt to stay on in the marriage, but that space was also made available And the whole idea was that as civil society strengthens, as the implementation of the Child Marriage Act strengthens, there will be more and more support for girls to opt out of marriage or to resist being married at a younger age. And that is how it will act. But a great maturity was shown, we believe, in 2006. And what has happened? Actually, there have been impressive gains in reduction in child marriages over the years, and the most impressive gains we see between the years NFHS 3 and 4, that is 2005-6, when nearly half of the young, so this is a statistic which counts what young girls between the age group of 20 to 24 reported. So nearly half of those girls, 47%, reported that they got married under the age of 18 years. And in 2015-16, we saw this figure itself had nearly half, and 27%, 1 in 4 girls reported that they got married under the age of 18 years. And since these numbers were higher than 47% before, the numbers are not actually comparable, and hence I'm not using those statistics. But in 2020-22, the NFHS 5 latest report is in hand, and there we see 23% of the girls were married before. So the pace has slowed down between 27 and 23, but it is continuously going down, the proportion of girls married under the age of 18 years. And consequently, even if you look at organizations who work with young people, you will rarely find the word child marriage used very often. And child marriage is often used in circles who are not very familiar with the law or who are not working with young people. And why is that? That is because as you see reduction in child marriages taking place, I'm using this word interchangeably with other words so that it's clear that we are talking about the same thing. We see as the proportion of child marriages goes down, the age at which, median age, the mean age at which girls are getting married is increasing, and it is no longer 10 years, 11 years, 12-year-old children who are getting married, but it is increasingly in the age group of 15 to 18 years. So what we are looking at is late adolescent marriages, or early marriages as very often they are termed, because the whole imagery of a child marriage is very different. So we need to keep the ground realities of this in front of us and remember that we are now talking about late adolescent girls getting married under the age of 18 years and boys often getting married much beyond. Now, what is all this complexity that has entered the entire arena of child marriages recently? And the act itself is called Prohibition of Child Marriages Act. So wherever we are talking about the act, we'll also use that terminology. As generally SDGs have given a very good framework globally to accelerate change. It has reduced maternal mortality. It has spurred a lot of movement forward for girls and women. But at the same time, if we look at frameworks without looking at whether they are grounded in our realities, there could be some contradictions that come up. And exactly that kind of contradiction has happened in this area. For example, the aggression with which governments have started feeling that that child marriages are not reducing as much as they would like it to. And if people were really looking at the well-being of young people, which they ought to be, it would be great, because then your strategies will be grounded. But increasingly we find that numbers play a big role, and it is a feeling that you need to be ahead of the race without sometimes looking at what is happening. So in two states, once in 2016 in Karnataka, and then more recently in 2018 in Haryana, we saw that the state governments decided, let's not keep child marriages voidable. That means it is on the young people whether they want to keep it or they want to do away with it, but rather let's make it void ab initio. That means right at the beginning, the marriage will never be recognized and it will be made a redundant marriage. And then in Uttar Pradesh, recently, the state government has announced the new rules under the PCMA, Child Marriage Act, and they were displayed for feedback from the public. And that is how we came to study these rules. And they also say that we would like to make all underage marriages void ab initio right at the beginning. And in 2008, the Law Commission of India, 205th report, they were also asked to opine what they think would be the best way for the Child Marriage Act, and even they opined that we think all child marriages need to be made void. And this is a opinion which is being held by. So there are two or three things which are currently dividing different movements who are otherwise all for reduction of early marriages, but suddenly we find ourselves on two sides of the debate, and that is whether making all early marriages void is a good thing or not. So generally, we find at the ground level a general apathy about the implementation of the act. This has been a reality, and that is why it is all the more important to ground our strategies there. Because what happens? One is that we need to confront this entire issue. Is child marriage a social issue or is it a legal issue? Because if it was just a legal issue, since 1978 we have the minimum age of marriage is 18 years. We should have attained that age totally, but that has not happened. And why has it not happened? When we go to the ground level, we see that the child marriage prohibition officers are there. They have hardly any capacity building, they have hardly any budgets, they're very much a part of the society, and they're expected to function there on their own to go and stop child marriages. I think many of you would know the story of Bhavri Devi. She was a Sathin in Rajasthan, and Rajasthan for a long time has been known to be the high. It is no longer true statistically, but they've had a history of a very large proportion of marriages happening underage. Now the numbers are higher in UP, Bihar, and West Bengal, but Rajasthan does have its own share of early marriages. And Bhavri Devi was a Sathin, and in the 80s, when she went to stop a child marriage in the home of a higher caste family, she was gang raped at the time, just because they felt, what is this audacity of a person who comes and dares to stop an early marriage in our family? So that is the kind of public pressure that is there, and people don't accept very easily this whole phenomena of their social customs and traditions being interfered with. So what do we expect of this child marriage prohibition officer over there? Amongst the society he lives in, the same whatever sarpanch, panchayat, police, patil, all of those people, upper caste, upper middle classes, and also the poorer classes and the marginalized section also, because there are some things which commonly bind all of these, and that is the patriarchal social norms. Many believe that girls ought to be married early. So if you have one officer and with very little support expected to go and stop those marriages, it is unlikely to happen. So what we have seen at the ground level is that they just turn a blind eye when the parents are willing, when it is an upper caste family, middle or upper class family, when they enjoy a lot of support, or even otherwise. Generally, the whole idea is to not interfere much in those marriages at all, and that is one major reason why child marriages have gone down, but due to other reasons and not necessarily because the law was very efficiently implemented. So why are we then against making all child marriages void? One is that it is just on paper we may look very good, that if you just make all early marriages void ab initio, you will just come up with a number of zero. So you will look very good on paper, but what is actually happening at the ground level? If it is a social phenomenon, if a large majority of people really feel that it ought to happen, can something like just canceling those marriages work? Because then we find there has been a case in Karnataka where a girl got married under the age of 18 years and her husband died. And suddenly there was this whole question, is she married or is she not married? Women actually accrue on a whole lot of rights, right from property rights to even service rules of the husband may actually give compensation for the family. Insurance, she could be a beneficiary of insurance. She might be pregnant, she might need reproductive sexual health services. And because all of these things in a sense are linked to her marriage, there's this entire question of where does she go now? And already we find that girls are undervalued in society, and there is very little support for girls and their property rights and other things. So this can be a great example just to deprive her of those rights. And we know that social activists are running from pillar to post to really see what can be done about a marriage which is no longer considered a marriage in the books of the state. But at the same time, you really need to follow a process to annul it. So it's not like because it's cancelled at the beginning, at least it saves you on the paperwork. No, the marriage has happened, there needs to be a process to annul it, and there's a whole lot of legal issues linked to that. So the entire status of those kinds of marriages is currently not known. And then to add to the complexity of this, should marriages be made void or not? In 2020, there was a task force set up by the government of India, and the explicit aim of this task force was to opine whether making the minimum age of marriage for girls 21 up to 21 years, increasing it, is that going to be a good move? One, for the maternal health of women and girls, and one, to reduce maternal mortality. So an explicit mandate was given to the task force to say, why should we not, please tell us, study, talk to people and tell us why we should not be making the minimum age of marriage 21 years, and will it not help maternal health and maternal mortality? But we see, over the span of nearly 2 years now, the narrative has kept changing. So first, the terms of reference for the task force was very heavily on the side of maternal health and maternal mortality. Slowly, the narrative has changed, and there has been a lot of noise about why shouldn't we seek gender equality in the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act. Why should the minimum age of marriage for boys be 21 years and for girls be 18 years? This is gender inequality. So suddenly we find that for so many years, neither the men's rights groups nor any other progressives in society felt that having the minimum age of marriage for boys at 21 years was unjust. Neither were we seeing that men are marrying too early and that kind of an age is essential for them. Nobody was monitoring their minimum age of marriage the way girls has been married, simply because a large majority of men don't even know that what is the minimum age of marriage for men, because they are generally not facing the same kind of coercion to get married early, and boys are getting married at a much older age than do girls. For example, now it is about 24 and a half is the median age of marriage for boys, and nobody is and it's much above 21 years, so there's no question. Then the entire thing of how do we conceptualize gender equality? Are we looking at just numbers? Are we looking at only formal equality? Because what happens in front of the law and in law books is often only formal equality, which means what is it that you can say formally is whether it is same or equal. And substantive equality is what we say is fairness. If tomorrow you were to institute special measures so that girls are able to go to school, you would think of that as substantive equality. You're not going to think, oh, you're giving scholarships and bicycles to girls and not to boys. That's gender inequality. No, nobody in India would ever think of that. They would say these incentives are important for girls to continue their schooling. So that is substantive equality. But now suddenly the narrative seems to be only talking about formal equality, 18 and 21. Then we find the narrative shifting to women's empowerment. Women need to be empowered, and that is why the age of marriage needs to move up from 18 years to 21 years. And then another narrative has made its place. Women's nutrition and livelihood needs to be looked after, and that is why her age of marriage needs to move up to 21 years. Now, is there like I said, that this is a strange phenomena because it's the organizations or the activists or the groups who are really keenly working with the young people to make sure there are minimum underage marriages. Those are the same people who are opposing this move suddenly and thinking about and generally trying to draw attention to a number of things related to both underage marriage, nutrition, livelihood, women's empowerment. Because we ask the question, is a woman's education going to automatically go up if the law books say that the minimum age of marriage has to be 21 years? Is her health going to automatically improve? Is she going to get jobs? Are skills going to be automatically built? So if we look at the latest National Family Health Survey, what do we see? That the indicators for undernutrition overall, India has the highest number of undernourished children as well as women, and it is a matter of shame. Everybody knows that India has this problem, but somehow if you look at from the late 1990s to now, our figures of undernutrition have hardly moved, and the NFHS 5 also shows that anemia among women has hardly moved, undernutrition among women has hardly moved. In fact, there has been an increase among in anemia among pregnant women, and we know that in the last 3 to 4 years there has been a continuous decrease in women's share in livelihoods, and their labor force participation has been regularly reducing. While on the other hand, we see that the proportion of girls getting married under the age of 18 has also gone down. That means there doesn't seem to be a simplistic relationship between, if you prevent early marriages, you will automatically be able to provide livelihoods, education, empowerment, or even nutrition to women and girls. So what is actually happening there? There is a narrative that is missing and nobody is picking that up. So the task force has submitted its report. They have not made the report public, but the chairperson of the task force has given several interviews, and so has the government talked that the task force indeed did recommend that the age of marriage for girls needs to be raised from 18 years to 21 years. An amendment has been introduced in parliament. The cabinet even passed that amendment, but then there was a plethora of groups opposing it, and as in deference to that, now the entire issue of should the minimum age of marriage for girls be raised to 21 years is now with the parliamentary standing committee on sports, education, youth, and women empowerment. So it's an all-in-one standing committee, but it is seized with this important issue. And unfortunately, there's only one woman in the committee, which also speaks loudly about the gender equality challenges that we have. So why is this move been such a divisive move? Because apparently it does seem very progressive, and many people ask, when last year we have built this entire campaign called empowerment not age. Yani ki don't just look at age, look at what is going to substantively improve the empowerment of girls. So very often young people have come to us and asked us, so what is the harm? Let there be an age, let it stay on the statute books, and we continue with all the other steps that are required. But we see, just as the problems which arise when marriages are made void, there are going to be several problems that arise because the age of marriage has been increased to 21 years. And not just that, that if there is this conceptualization that law is taking its own course, but other social measures for empowerment of girls are also running side by side, we find that that is not so. I explained to you the issues that have come up in the last 3 to 4 years. All of them are legal issues. Should marriages be made void or not? Should the minimum age be raised or not? There hasn't been a debate on what is happening to education for girls, which is a proven way of reducing early marriages. What are the root causes of early marriages? What has worked and what has not worked? And does the law as it stands currently actually work? So what we have seen is education is an important, one of the most important factors that is a predictor for age of marriage. So now we see that the primary school enrollment, and an important factor in that was the Right to Education Act. And that is a social act that is not just talking about legalities, it is talking about a change in material reality for girls. And there's nearly 100% enrollment of girls in primary school, and there is almost no gender gap in primary school now. But the gender gap opens up at the level of secondary schools. Only 50 to 60% of girls, and this varies across states, so you have that variable number. Only those many girls are actually into secondary school, and that is a major step where girls are dropping out of school and getting married. And we see now that is also the reason why you see 15 to 18 as the maximum number of girls are getting married, and dropping out of school is an important predictor of age of marriage. And one is The other major reason which we can see is poverty. There is a clear gradient where the poorest, almost 70% of early marriages are happening among the poorest quintiles, and the next is the poorer quintiles. And the middle and upper classes almost have nil, nil underage marriages. And then also you see the socially marginalized communities such as the Dalit, the Adivasi, they also because they are one of the most impoverished, also face high levels of, so something that is really linked to marginalization, social marginalization, and the ability to keep girls in school. Like both factors unraveled during the COVID crisis, and we saw there were no schools. Schools were shut for almost 2 years. There was a big digital divide. There is a huge number of households who do not have internet and adequate access to mobile phones. Leave aside laptop. Nobody was even thinking of laptops. People were thinking schooling will happen on mobile phones. And we know how difficult that is. The screens are small, certainly not an ideal way. But even within that, there is this entire discourse dictated by social norms where if you give phones in the hands of girls, it's considered a big risk. Girls will elope and bring shame on the family. And that is why from time to time there are fatwas restricting diktats of different kinds, restricting women's access to phone calls. So education certainly was not accessible, available. There was also lack of work and lack of income. We saw the misery of migrant families. So, and after that, what happens? You see multiple reports of clandestine or openly held child marriages. Because if you think that this is a marker of social distress, child marriage is a marker of gender inequality and social distress, that was at its maximum during the crisis, and that is what we saw. So what we really need to do is actually alleviate this poverty and this social crisis and the insecurity that is linked to the way in which girls are expected to behave, and the fear that the girls will elope, and those kinds of, and what if she elopes, the whole fear of premarital taboo and premarital sex taboo linked to that, taboo linked to sexuality education. Those are the things which are the uphill task. Changes in law are the easy way out. We also saw that once this announcement for age of marriage to 21 years was made, we saw a spurt of reports of marriages taking place, mostly for girls who have completed 18 years, because there's this whole fear that now we may have to wait till 21 years. So clearly, when the community is not ready for it, any number of laws and changes in laws are not going to make a difference. Here, I'm just giving an example of, we have collected several field level case studies, and what we found, this girl, Ankita, she's a gender champion with us, and she has helped to stop and support several girls who did not want to get married early. She's from Abdulpur village in Purkazi block of Muzaffarpur in UP. And what she faced basically was from her uncle. When her mother was unwell, her uncle got kind of an upper hand in the family affairs, and he started dictating girls should not be educated, she may elope and bring a bad name to the family, girls need to be married. So if this is the thinking, then any number of changes to the law are not going to help make a difference. And she was supported by the Kishori Sangh that was there in her village, and they told her, we will support you. So why do women actually put up with a lot of violence that they face and with gender unequal practices such as early marriages? Because there is no social support. They may want to opt out, but where do they go? And what is the support? Neither financial nor social support. So what we find very often is, why do girls drop out of school and why do girls marry early? You can see the same kinds of reasons coming out. One is dropping out of school, schools not being friendly to girls, there's no space for menstrual hygiene, there are no toilets, there's sexual harassment on the way to school or generally in public places, there's this whole concept of dowry. And by the way, the prosecution both under the Dowry Act and under the Child Marriage Act is woefully low. So we haven't really been able to make a headway in actually implementing these laws, but we seem to be very enthusiastic about making those laws. And then there is this whole thing of, if a girl is older, she will have to pay a higher dowry. If she's more educated, she'll have to pay a higher dowry. There's this whole concept of shame honor, chastity, virginity that is linked. And the other major problem is, of course, of poverty and the girls not having any gainful employment, any skills, or even families when girls drop out of schools are thinking that the girls have nothing meaningful to add. They're only doing domestic chores around the house, and that is when the major number of early marriages take place. And when we actually go and see how the law is implemented at the ground level, we also see that these same child marriage protection officers would listen to the parents mostly than oppose where the parents really want to get their girls married early. But very often they were reporting that the only cases that get mostly filed are when the parents come up with a complaint of early marriage. And we said, why would parents complain of early marriage? And those are the cases where the girls are choosing their own partners. They are eloping or they're forced to elope because they know there is stiff opposition. So currently the child marriage law and other laws are actually helping parents to ward off marriages which they don't think are socially desirable. They could be intercaste marriages, they could be marriages against outside the religion. And when it is the parents who are wanting those marriages to not take place, is the maximum time they are approaching the child marriage law and law officers. And if you actually increase this age to 21 years, it's going to strengthen the hands of parents much more, while actually not changing any of those social phenomena and not giving not doing anything meaningful to improve the girls' education. Because just because you change laws, it doesn't make a change to the material reality of girls. You know, if their access to schooling has been restricted because there are no schools close to home, then unless those schools come, it's not going to make a change. Girls will be at home and parents will think that the best way for them is to now get married. So if we look at girls situation in its totality, we will think differently of these laws, and then possibly there won't be this kind of divide that happens. So I'll stop here and I'll see if anyone has any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amita ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. It really gave us so many insights into the debate and how to understand this issue, which seems very conflicting from both sides, but you helped us gain a lot of perspective today. So I'll open the floor for questions. Just to humbly reiterate, I shall be reading the comments and queries from the chat box. And in case you wish to ask your question verbally, please raise your hands before unmuting. Please keep questions brief and to the point. Any more queries following the session can be made to us at 5elements.sdg@gmail.com. So till any of the questions come in, I just had a question of my own. So if you could tell us how the age of consent issue, ties into this larger debate.
Actually, the two issues are very much linked. They're not separate issues, but I tried not to talk about the age of consent issue in this meeting because it can be quite complex for people to wrap their minds around. But you're right that side by side with the age of marriage issue, there is a big issue with the age of consent. And from the 1940s onwards till as recently as 2012, the age of consent, that is the age at which girls are considered old enough to consent for sexual activity, was actually 16 years. And while I was studying this topic, I came across a Law Commission report which said now that the Law Commission report was talking about the 1978 age of marriage institute, which happened at 18 years. So this is an older report, and they were saying now that the age of marriage has been put at 18 years, I don't know why the age of consent has to be at 16 years. Let us make it 18 years. That was not accepted at that point. But you see, the thinking of the lawmakers, the policy makers, is that girls cannot be sexually active outside of marriage. But this thing, though was averted in that time, really came to reality in 2012 and came to reality in a protectionist measure. So just as this age of marriage is kind of a protectionist measure. They feel if you hide the girls, if you don't, if you make it illegal, as though they will not get married at 21. Similarly, what happened is, in the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, all the sexual contact under the age of 18 years has been made a offense. We know that whenever there is sexual contact, it could be consensual or it could not be consensual. So there are always those two possibilities. But by raising the age of consent to 18 years, and coincidentally, not coincidentally, by design, I would say, making it the same as age of marriage, there is a signal being given that that young people are not having sex under the age of 18, and that is not true. A large majority of young people are sexually active under the age of 18 years. And in fact, about 10 to 12 are also sexually active under the age of 15 years. So what it has done actually is it has complicated the reproductive and sexual health rights of girls who are sexually active or get married before the age of 18 years. And the biggest fear is, because it is so much linked to the age of marriage, the conception of age of marriage, it is very likely that people are going to start thinking of, if the age of marriage is raised, they're also going to start thinking of age of consent conjoined with that, and that would be a very disastrous situation for us.
Thank you so much. Also, could you share some of your experiences working with boys on this issue? So what do men in the community, when you go for your field studies, what are some of their reactions, and what are those challenges when it comes to generating more awareness?
Yeah, surely I will share, but I also see a very good friend of mine, Rajni, who has also worked with us very much, is also here. So if she wants to share something, I will ask her to please also share her experiences. So basically, what we try and do is we have a campaign called Bano Nahi Soch, that is be a new thought, and basically it talks about gender equality by really working at the level of social norms. So when we talk about girls' leadership, we also build leadership among men and boys, but the leadership is supportive leadership. It is meant to bring about gender equality and not just go after individual rights of the men and boys. So we find that whenever we have engaged with boys in this framework, it has really led to a lot of change in the relationship between girls and boys, in better gender equality. In fact, during COVID times, many mothers told us that they helped us at home when there was no help, washing utensils, in cooking, cleaning. So it's a different experience totally if we are able to reach out to boys and talk to them in this new framework. It is not competitive, it is not to bring down the girls, but what we have failed to do is give a gender equality framework to the boys at large through our schools and other ways. And that's why very often we find a conflicting kind of relationship between girls and boys, and not necessarily a supportive one. I think Rajni has dropped out.
She was dropped out. We'll wait a minute or two for any other questions. Given that, like, I'll close after that.
So now the age of marriage bill is with the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and today was the last day when they had invited submissions on what do you think, should the age of marriage be amended to 21 years. And we have given our submission, as have other women's rights organizations, child rights organizations. So now we are awaiting to see what the committee decides and how the issue will go.
Looking forward to a positive outcome.
Yeah.
If you want, you can verbally ask your question in the chat. I don't think the
Yeah, it was just an error from my side, ma'am. I was like, since how predictable is the next generation children like under the age of 18? How we can predict their activeness in this kind of behavior or the sexual thing or whatever maybe? How predictable is their awareness about that?
Nothing is predictable. Everything is dependent on the social circumstances. So I do know what you're exactly asking, but for example, as we can see that about 23% of young girls are getting married under the age of 18 years. Social change is very slow. So it's not going to jump to zero tomorrow. It's going to gradually go down. And if there is a disruption like COVID or anything else, it can go up as well. So we need to closely monitor the social circumstances. But I don't know if Avani, you wanted to say something else.
No, the same, ma'am. Because no, nothing. Because at the when there's a change in this generation, like we can see the difference in how they perceive the things and all. So it's like what we can expect in the again in the way the things are different for the middle class families and for the upper class families. So I just wondering how predictable is it. We can imagine the children will be aware at that tender age or likely.
So that's what. So we didn't need any amendments in law for the middle classes and upper classes. They automatically, when you empower girls, they're not going to want to marry at an early age. They might have boyfriends, but they're going to decide on their own when they want to be tied up in the relationship of marriage. So empowerment is the key, not dictating for the young people. But unfortunately, it seems like there are a different set of rules for the poor. We go by that dictum. Was there a question in the chat box? How social media has an effect on youngsters these days regarding the same issues and how they should be educated about it. Also an advice to parents regarding the same. So it's true that social media is everywhere and you cannot police and you cannot control it. The only thing what you can really do is teach children to be responsible in everything they do, not just in sexual relationships, in using social media, in gender equality, in respecting girls and women. And that is something where we have utterly failed young people. For example, sex education is such a taboo in India. Comprehensive sexuality education is absent. And why do you think young girls, we have studied several cases where young girls and boys had a relationship, the girl became pregnant, and that is what precipitated the marriage. So it's not like they were going to get married, they were sexually experimenting. It's not like the girl felt this is the man of my life and I want to be with him all my life. No, sometimes a mistake, because they don't know how pregnancy occurs, what is the safe period, when can they get girls can get pregnant even before the menstruation has started, but who has talked to them? Girls come and ask questions like, I have been holding hands with my partner, will I get pregnant? And then they come also and say that we have had sex without any protection several times, but I never thought I will get pregnant. Because girls and boys, even boys, we know that boyfriends just run away sometimes when the girlfriend gets pregnant, but that's because they just utterly terrified that there is a pregnancy. If they were to get a scientific responsible information that this is a natural body course, it is going to happen, there are ways around it. You can use contraception. If you're within, if it is safe, you can do a safe abortion. The limit for safe abortion has been raised from 20 weeks to 24 weeks. This is what we need to tell our young people. Then they're not going to be scandalized with, but that's also the problem that the age of consent has brought, because girls under the age of 18 years, 23% are getting married. Of course, they're sexually active. Of course, they're requiring everything from contraception to safe abortions, but it's become a crime. Under the age of 18 years, to be sexually active has become a crime. So in the same country where 23% of girls are getting married under the age of 18 years, you've made it a law which has no exceptions, that it's a crime to be sexually active. I don't know, it's only in India that these kinds of contradictory things can coexist, and they're wanting to increase that age to 21 years now without changing anything on the ground level, which is going to protect young people. And exactly what we are saying is actually empower the young people. They will find solutions on their own. Don't withhold information from them. teach them to be responsible, and they will find innovative solutions for it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a great message at the end. And close given the time. With this, we come to the end of our it is a privilege and the entire team here at 5 Elements. Thank you, Amita ma'am, for taking time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us about the groundwork Oxfam India is doing to create a more gender-sensitive and just society, starting from the grassroots. We are also grateful to our enthusiastic participants for the curiosity and enthusiasm in making this a unique learning. Please come back next month as we explore yet another issue with the lens of gender justice. Please feel free to write to us at 5elements.fbg@gmail.com. Thank you, stay safe, and
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Do send me the statistics of how many joined on YouTube, etc. Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure being here with you.
Thank you so much for joining.